from where I sit today, I don't think there's anything going to sort of hold us back other than ourselves in getting to be about $1 billion of revenue in about 5 years' time.
The Architects of Business, with EY Entrepreneur of the Year, telling the inspirational stories behind Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs.
Hello and welcome to the Architects of Business, made in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year, where you will hear the inspirational stories of some of Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Sonya Lennon, broadcasting remotely at this time, and on this week's show I chat with Andrew Day, CEO of Keyword Studios, an Irish computer game company who work on some of the biggest names in the world, from Fortnite to Call of Duty. He projects revenue of in excess of $1 billion by 2025. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe to get brand new shows directly into your feed. Andrew Day, CEO of Keyword Studios, thank you so much for joining us on Architects of Business today. I have to say, I feel like a bit of a fraud taking your time, not because I'm not fascinated by your story, but because I'm not a gamer. And I feel like more than a million people would rather be in this seat than me right now. Your story is extraordinary. The arc of the growth of Keyword is amazing. But as always on this show, I would love to start at the beginning. So you were born and grew up in South Africa.
Correct. Yep. Fantastic childhood.
And yes, barefoot gambling around the place, I gather.
Exactly.
And so, when did the bug of the cut and thrust of business really sink into you?
Oh, it was way back. So yeah, definitely while I was in South Africa. So I think my dad was in business. He ran one of South Africa's biggest companies. So as a managing director, a salaried guy. And then around us, obviously, there were wealthy entrepreneurs. Well, not obviously, but there were wealthy entrepreneurs. I always looked at those other guys that had nicer cars and bigger houses and stuff and thought, well, the salary job of my dad is all very impressive, but I'm actually going to have a go at doing my own thing. And from a very early age, I wanted to have my own engineering shop or something like that. So that's when it began.
So it's really interesting to me that you were able to divine the difference between, a sort of an employment and an entrepreneurial position so early on, because it's quite nuanced, and particularly when you're surrounded by nice things as a kid. For most kids, it doesn't really matter how you got them.
Yeah, no, that's true, actually. And it's something that actually it's stuck with me for a long, long time, because, I very much wanted to own and run my own business. And eventually I wanted to do an IPO, float a business and run a publicly quoted company. But I didn't want to get...
From the age of 5, right?
Well, almost. not much, but as I got to understand these things, I didn't really want to do it starting from my own business on day one. In fact, I had started a business while at university. Not my first business, but I'd started one at university. Raised some money, got that thing going, and then very quickly realized that if I didn't get out of it very soon, I'd be stuck with it. So it was always this idea that I needed to gain
hold on
experience.
there 1 second. Mm-hmm. So just sorry to cut across you, but so let's go back to the very beginning. What was your first business?
My first business was breeding birds for sale. So budgies, cockatiels, lovebirds, Indian ringnecks, quails, all that sort of stuff. So started with 4 budgies and ended up with hundreds of birds. And that was... I
tell you, Andrew, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, so that...
There you go.
Yeah, so that made me some pocket money. And then I used to... from there, was buying and selling cars and doing them up and swapping engines over and repainting them and doing all that sort of stuff. I love building things. So it doesn't matter whether it's business or making a shed in the garden or whatever. I like building and making and fixing things. So I think the same is true a little bit with business. You can shape a business, and if you get it right, it's hugely rewarding.
So if we go back then to your student days, where did you immerse yourself in terms of your education?
So it was kind of odd, because I ended up doing something that I didn't choose, but my employer at the time chose. So I left school and went straight to a company called Rothmans International tobacco business, which actually took me to Belfast, Carrickfergus, and their factory there.
From South Africa?
No, this was, so I left South Africa when I was 15, and so I joined Rothmans when I was about 18, I guess. So I found myself in Belfast during the less good days. So basically they sent me to university to study managerial sciences. I was basically being groomed to be a factory manager or a director of production of the future. I left Rothmans and joined a company called Britannia Security Group, which was a very fast-growing business services group listed on what was then the USM section of the London market. And I was basically the bag carrier for the managing director who kind of mentored me and taught me everything about M&A. So we did 20 acquisitions in 18 months together. That was an incredible period of time, and the company went from 40 million market cap to 200 million market cap in the same period of time. So that was a kind of fortunate break and took me into the field of M&A, which I've continued to sort of plow for quite some time.
So, and we'll come back to that, because M&A is such a pivotal piece of the growth of Keyword now. Yeah. Can I ask you about the spirit of your mentor in entering into M&As? Because I love the idea that, that level of negotiation is almost a sort of a spiritual art form. You have to have a mindset that is fit for purpose, I guess. What was the approach?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing was, and something that I always carry with me, is that M&A is not a buying process; it's a selling process. You need to sell the benefits of joining the company you're running to the seller, and it's really all about strategic fit and cultural fit, much more than it is about the numbers. It's actually quite hard to pay too much for something if the strategy and the fit was correct. Those are the most important things. And then, like I say, in terms of the negotiation itself, it took me a while to learn this, I think, but essentially, it's not about shafting one another. It's about just being as open as possible throughout the negotiation, and being clear on what you can move on and what you can't move on. And if the other side knows that, then things tend to go fairly smoothly. It also helps, frankly.
And I suppose the ultimate aim is to create a mutual benefit.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's any point in buying a whole bunch of businesses and just have them continue to do exactly the same as they did before. I don't think you're creating any value in doing that. But I think if you can bring companies into a supportive environment, encourage them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise be doing themselves, either through a little bit of management discipline or through just relieving some of the financial pressures that companies face as sort of smaller entrepreneurial businesses, you can actually encourage them to grow much, much faster. And if you can then sort of start to knit them together as well, you actually create something new from the individual pieces. And I think that's one of the things that Keywords has done really quite successfully. It's never perfect, but it's generally the right way of considering what we've done with the companies that we've acquired.
It's funny because reading the story and the infrastructure and a sort of ecosystem that you've built, it almost seems like Keywords has created a hammock of support under an entire industry. So it's a beautiful thing to watch. But let's go back to
I need to remember those words. I'm going to reuse that. The hammock of support. That's going to be reused, yeah, for sure.
That one's for free, Andrew.
Thank you.
So let's go back to this period in your career where you've had 2 intensive years of training, almost sort of a Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of this is how you do it. What was next?
So the stock market crash of 1987 was next, and that put paid to the story of Britannia Security Group as it was. So I moved on and I sold my trade as an M&A guy to a company called TIP Europe, which was actually renting semi-trailers, the big 40-foot trailers that go behind an articulated lorry.
Yeah.
And so I became very, very knowledgeable on trailers and took over the strategic planning and M&A process for that company, which took me into doing deals in Europe. And then when things slowed down there as well, which it did after it got overgeared, again I moved on, staying in M&A to a company called Britannia Security Group. And the important thing is this is the first connection with Keywords. So Britannia Security Group was specialty chemicals, again very, very different. I did the first 3 years of M&A, this time on a global scale for them, but always with the intention of running a business that I helped them acquire or that I'd acquired for them. It didn't quite happen that way. The company fell on slightly sort of sticky times, and I was parachuted in to fix a whole bunch of businesses across the world, which I did, and then went on to run the global aerospace business. So that was kind of 9 years of that. And during that time, that's when I met Giorgio Guastalla, who was the guy that ended up founding Keywords.
So how did that meet happen?
So he was a college student. He was studying business in Italy, in Rome, I think. And through connections, we got a request saying, can we provide a placement to this Italian business guy? And I put up my hand. And so, since then, basically, we've stayed together as friends and business colleagues for 25 years. But he did
Happy
give
anniversary.
Up on me. Thank you very much. Yeah, we did break open a glass of champagne to celebrate that point.
Good.
But yeah, that's yeah. So that's where all that came, and that was one of my opportunities to do a bit of mentoring in reverse.
So he came in under your wing,
yep.
And obviously was an incredibly good student. When did Keywords actually start?
Keywords started in 1998. So I was still at Britannia Security Group. Giorgio, I had posted him in France, and I think at a certain point that was enough for him. I think he had done sort of 2 years of his time in France, and he wanted to get out and do something different. So he joined his girlfriend in Dublin, Ireland, and together they set up Keywords, which was basically providing translation services to tech companies, Microsoft first and foremost, but also other companies like Oracle and so on. And then in 2009, Giorgio finally, after many years of nagging, managed to persuade me to come and run Keywords. So in 2009, we did a deal. We set a new strategy for the business, and I think that's really, in many ways, the beginnings of the Keywords you see today.
So one thing that I think really comes to the fore in talking to you, Andrew, is your dedication to strategy. It seems to be a theme running through absolutely everything from the early days of having a vision for what you wanted your life to be, right through to seeing the opportunity. And I suppose the first piece of strategy is seeing the opportunity. The second and harder piece is sticking to that vision,
Yep.
and seeing it through. So you might talk to us a little bit about your approach, particularly at that time when you came in as CEO with a massive job to do.
Yeah, so it was, Keywords employed 50 people. It was doing nicely. It was turning over, 2 or 3 million, I think, and making good profit. So it was a very nice business, but it was also a sort of fragile business. It felt like it, first of all, was very dependent on one particular client, which is never a good thing, I think. It felt like at any point somebody could decide to give business to a competitor or whatever, and the business would be in a bit of trouble. So rather than sit there and be fearful of that was one of the first decisions we took. We're not going to be afraid of this. We're not going to try and migrate away from some clients. What we're going to do is we're going to go out and build business with other clients to compensate for that degree of dependency. So rather than sort of stay there and try and defend what we've got, we were very, very clear that we wanted to move forward and build something substantial from this. So that was part of it. The other part was just recognizing, as you rightly said, the opportunity. And the opportunity kind of was, well, with benefit of hindsight, it was very clear to see. I don't know if it was that clear at that time, but basically you had a very interesting market environment within the video games industry, and that you had very large global players, multi-billion-dollar companies like Electronic Arts and Activision and Microsoft and Nintendo and so on. And then when you looked around at companies like us that they were relying on, okay, we're very good at what we did, but we provided pretty much a single service in a single geography, and it just seemed very, very odd. If you look around any other major industry, and the video games industry, I can't remember what it was sized at those days, maybe 90 billion or something. Now it's about $150 billion in size. It's a meaningful industry. It's a very large industry, but continues to sort of exhibit, and certainly did then even more so, this behavior of kind of doing everything itself and
fractured.
Fractured and dealing with very fragmented supply chains, and more or less treating
and
every
can I
supplier
ask you then, just to be clear, what was the service that you were delivering at that point?
At that point, it was localization. So we were translating video games, not the code, but the text and the voiced assets in the video games. So the story, if you like, and the character interactions and all of that, we were translating those into other languages so that a game developed in English could be consumed with just as much sort of immersion in France or in Spain or in Italy or whatever. So it was a very valuable service, and it obviously helped our clients penetrate new markets and also, increase the return on investment on their development costs as they could sell the game to more consumers. So that was basically our specialty, and from there we developed a system of being able to test those games as well. Because one thing that people perhaps don't appreciate is pretty much all video games are released in all the languages at the same time. So that means you're adapting the foreign versions at the same time as the English version is still being developed and so on. So the only way to make sure you've got it all right is to be able to put it all together as a sort of package of code and text and stuff, and then test it in kind of live operation. So we developed an efficient system of doing that.
And position Keyword now for what it is, for who its clients are, for what it does and what it operates. And I think when we could talk about this hammock of support, this is where it really kind of gets surfaced, if you like.
Yes, I was just about to use that. I was just coming up with a new elevator pitch involving hammocks. Yeah, so where we are today, Sonya, is we really provide services throughout the life cycle of video games. So from creating them, co-developing them, adapting them, testing them, supporting them in live operations. We do everything. And we've recently been extending our reach into marketing services, specifically for video games as well.
So to give a sense of how much money is at stake here, give us a little roll call of the games that you are involved with.
Oh, okay. That could take a while, but pretty much it's
top
pretty
five.
much. Well, yeah, okay. I'll get into trouble if I name top five, but I'll just give you some names. So, Call of Duty, Fortnite, League of Legends, Candy Crush, Clash of Clans.
So let's
Halo.
be clear. You are not providing that service with 50 people based in Dublin.
We have 8,500 people around the world providing these services, and it breaks down roughly about a third of our workforce is in Asia. We have strong presence in Tokyo, 5 cities in China, India, the Philippines. Then we come over to Europe, big presence in St. Petersburg, in Poland, across sort of Western Europe into Dublin, where we have our head office and 300 and something people, and then over to the Americas. Big presence in Canada, particularly Montreal, but also on the West Coast in Vancouver. And then into the US as well, where we have operations in Florida, in Seattle, Los Angeles, and so on. So, and recently Austin, Texas.
So 61 studios worldwide and 8,500 staff. That's a very different company to 50 people based in Dublin. What impact has that had on the work that you do?
It's a good question. I mean, in the early days, I was CEO and chief bottle washer, really doing everything. So a lot of the business development, the sales, and strategy and finance and everything else. And obviously, as the company's got bigger and bigger, one of the, I think the things that we've been very successful at doing, and it's obviously very important, is that we're able to grow a management team that's able to take on more and more of these tasks. It's not something by any means that one guy or lady can do. So it's been a very sort of important transition for myself in my role, which I like to say has come reasonably easily, because I'm very happy to give responsibility for big parts of the business to others. But it's often one of those things that sort of holds back companies, right? It's this feeling that you have to kind of control everything. And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing, is I've never really tried to control the detail.
And so, the way that Keywords has worked with this global spread of executive team must have necessitated remote working before it became the norm.
Indeed, yeah. So we've been working remotely really for forever. Certainly, when Skype first became a thing, we spent all our time talking to each other on Skype. The bit that's changed really is the guys at the coalface. The guys that are doing the testing, that are writing the code for the games, that are producing the art assets for the games. Those folks have always been working in studios, secure studios, and they're now working from home. So in a way, the environment is different. The way in which they work is actually quite similar, because everybody is allocated to a project. The project has a team structure around it. So although you're working from home, you are part of a active project with tasks and deadlines and everything else. So, the business continues to drive itself pretty well. And of course, through being a service provider rather than an end client, we have the disciplines of measuring things like time spent on tasks and productivity and all the rest of it. So we're very fortunate in that, and so we've been able to keep productivity really pretty good during these difficult times.
So Can we sort of move out of the trenches a little bit and get a high level view of the growth of keywords? Because I think there's a beautiful poetry to the sort of natural, organic, strategic growth of the company combined with the M&A strategy. It's sort of a twin track. So maybe talk to me a little bit about listing and the difference that made. And I think the real sort of clincher is the figures for growth, the projections that you're looking at, your relationship with the stock market. So if you could give me a little bit about that.
I like the way you describe it. This is the way that we see our business very much, is that our main focus is organic growth. In an industry that itself is growing and that has this trend towards using outsourced services rather than doing everything itself. We're in an industry that's transitioning, but it's still a very young industry. It just happens to be very large. So we have a lot of growth drivers sort of naturally by being in this industry and pursuing the strategy we're pursuing. So we expect ourselves to produce really good, strong organic growth year on year. And I think we always try to sort of set expectations that the minimum we expect of ourselves is about 10% organic growth a year, but we usually outperform that. And then on top of that, you have this acquisition effect. So as we're building out our various services, through acquisitions, what we're really doing is we're bringing in customer relationships, which we're then able to expand upon. We're bringing in expertise, which we're then also able to leverage. And we're also getting access to pools of talents.
And so a couple of quick fire ones. Give us a sense of the latest acquisitions.
Yes, so we've made a couple recently, both different. Both happen to be based in the UK, but that's not a reflection of anything in particular. The latest one is a company called Maverick Media, which is a long-standing marketing services business, very specifically focused on the video games industry. And this focus on the games industry is something that we keep coming back to, because there is something different about the games industry. It's not like any other industry. And the content itself is very, very complex, being this interface with, the most amazing creative with incredibly complicated software and AI and what have you. So there's some very specific reasons why you have specific suppliers to this industry. So Maverick is one of those companies. It's been around for quite a while. It has fantastic relationships with some great game companies and game IPs, including probably the one it's most known for, which is Pokemon.
And never heard of it.
and that in itself is I think now our fifth or sixth acquisition in marketing services. And again, it's sort of, you can see what we're doing here is we're building scale in a new area. All of those companies are growing nicely organically. So we'll add a few more of those before we get to a point where we say, actually, we've got to this point of being the go-to provider, and we'll see this accelerated organic growth. So that's that one. The other one was a company called Coconut Lizard. Great thing about this games industry is the names of the studios that you end up buying.
Anything goes.
Who would have thought I would be buying a company called Coconut Lizard? But so these guys are great. They're based up in the Northeast. There's a team of a bit over 25 folks, very specialized, very, very deep in a particular technology for building games called the Unreal Engine, which is gaining or has gained a lot of traction in the industry. It's a game engine on which many people now build their games.
And I suppose, to go ultimate bird's eye view on the company, the latest revenue figures.
Yeah, so I believe that the stock market is expecting us to generate something like 360 million euros of revenue this year. And obviously that's in a bit of a challenged year with COVID-19, but
And the funner piece is nearly the projections into the future, right?
Yeah, well, who knows? But certainly from where I sit today, I don't think there's anything going to sort of hold us back other than ourselves in getting to be about $1 billion of revenue in about 5 years' time. Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite close on a run rate basis, or we will be exiting this year of being at around $500 million, I hope. So from there,
that sounds like another bottle of champagne to me, Andrew.
Yes,
I have to say,
it would be. And one of the things, it's a silly thing really, because share prices and business performance and everything don't always sort of correlate. But one of the things that it just sort of acts as a little pat on the back for all these great keywordians around the world, is that we recently broke through the $2 billion market cap value as well on the stock exchange. So I think we're now at about 2.2 billion, which is incredible when you think that we IPO'd at a valuation of about it was about 50 million pounds at the time. I don't know what that was in US dollars, probably
that's extraordinary,
75 million or something. So yeah, it's been one interesting ride so far, and fortunately all in the right direction.
Yeah, and which is all the more reason to hail you as one of the alumni of EY Entrepreneur of the Year. What has that been like for you, being part of that network? Because every time I interview somebody who's part of this group, this elite group, there are extreme commonalities, one of them being a really authentic humility and a sense of graft. I think that comes through very strongly on you. Where have you found the value in that network?
Yeah, well, for me, I personally really enjoyed the process of going through the EOY of the year, including going to Hong Kong and seeing some really interesting businesses and having an opportunity to hang out in the bars with a few fellow entrepreneurs and so on. So it's funny how we don't take time to connect with people of like minds always, because we're so busy doing our own day jobs and taking care of family and all those normal things. So there was a great opportunity and remains a great opportunity to connect with fellow entrepreneurs. And looking forward to doing more of it, particularly when we get through these restricted travel times and are able to to meet up. And I'm certainly really gasping for a glass of Guinness.
Andrew Day, CEO of Keyword Studio. I think it's only fair to leave it there. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening and watching Architects of Business, made in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year. Thanks to the whole team here at Joe, and of course to our entrepreneur today, Andrew Day. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe to get brand new shows directly into your feed.